A few weeks ago, the Oshi no Ko anime adaptation by Doga Kobo was introduced officially to the world, and as expected, the highly anticipated show gained mass recognition as it climbed the charts and solidified its presence in the ever-expanding world of Japanese animation. And when you peel back the layers and really focus on the uphill battle the studio would have to overcome to do a proper adaptation of this great but very convoluted story, there was a bit worry as to how things would turn out. Now, several episodes into the new adaptation, we finally get to see the results of the studio's hard work. And so I'd like to ask the question that many are wondering: is Oshi no Ko a good anime adaptation? And the answer is yes. Okay, so I'm definitely not the only one who says this. In fact, the internet is flooding with post after post gushing about this series. But today I'd like to take a closer look at what made the adaptation work, what I liked, what I didn't like as much, and where things go from here. So coming off of his previous and massively successful series Kaguya-sama Love is War, author Akasaka teamed up with Scum's Wish mangaka Mengo Yokoyari to bring the story of the Japanese entertainment industry and Aqua and Ruby's revenge to the public at large. I first came across Oshi no Ko a few months ago when there wasn't too much about it on the internet, and other than the occasional enthusiast for the manga, most of what Akasaka was known for at that time was his work on Kaguya. So hearing it kinda had a perfect Blue-like plot according to a lot of people, which later more resembled Erased as I would find out, I dove right into it and feverishly read every single chapter in about a week or so. From there, I made a very in-depth review, which you can check out in the description or up in the corner of this video, and I waited for the anime. I didn't get to see the early release like many others did, but instead waited until April when it was opened up for the world to see. And we'll be getting into some spoiler territory, so if you want to skip, here's a timestamp. As I stated in my previous video, one of the most important aspects that makes Oshi no Ko work so well is its establishing chapters, which hook the reader before sending them into a whirlpool of events that throw them back and forth, swallowing their attention before spitting them out into the world of entertainment, and from there further darkening the narrative in very unexpected ways. And I have to say, the anime pulled it off with much the same energy that the source material did. They made a few changes, of course, however these were all minor modifications and didn't affect the overall narrative too much. Part of the reason the series has gotten off to such a great start is because it was allowed to thrive as a full-length feature film in its first iteration, establishing all the important hooking chapters in one fell swoop. This was honestly a great move, and I wish more shows would employ it, but the truth is that most don't get the opportunity. Take Chainsaw Man, for example. Chainsaw Man was arguably the most hyped up anime in history last year, but despite all the press, it aired in much the same 24-minute format that most anime does, especially in the modern day. I absolutely loved Chainsaw Man, but admittedly it doesn't have the strongest opening episodes in my opinion story-wise. In fact, it took a good 4 or 5 episodes before I got fully invested. I'm really glad I did and have picked up the manga since, but think of all the extra material they could have covered in the anime if the pilot had been as long as Oshi no Ko's, and think of how much more quickly people could get into the show and be invested in the story. It's pretty much the same amount of time when you dial it out, but the main difference is in the fact that a long, uninterrupted story tends to be easier to digest than weekly iterations that cover heavy exposition. If you're not interested in the story after episode 3, in most cases you might just end up dropping it. But for a long pilot, I feel people will be more likely to stick it out to the payoff at the end. This method of 90-minute anime pilots wouldn't work with every show, of course, but for ones with the story, budget, and fanbase building them up as much as Oshi no Ko, I think it's a great way to get your product out there from both a business and narrative standpoint. And for Oshi no Ko, this has worked wonders. This large opening act and the subsequent chapters have led to the show having absolutely on-point pacing. It hits everything at just about the right time, with many of the scenes corresponding directly to Mengo Yokoyari's beautifully drawn manga panels. One thing that did strike me, however, was how the animation can come off as rather limited at times. Now, don't get me wrong, Oshi no Ko is a fantastic looking anime. The art direction is on point and the color ratio is great. I just can see where the budget might be getting a little bit stretched, or where the animators have used a lot of panning techniques to give the illusion that more is happening on the screen than there actually is. And this is nothing new to animation. As more and more shows get pumped out every season by studios in and outside of Japan, anime has become somewhat of an ever-expanding pool of entertainment, where talent is stretched and animators are often grossly underpaid and overworked. So I'm definitely not trying to criticize them. It's more the fact that if these kind of limitations are occurring this often in one of the most well-known anime of the year, then that's a direct indication of the impossible work standards and deadlines these studios scramble to meet across the board, and a sure sign that things really should change. I personally would be fine with much fewer better quality series than the corporate-driven metaverse that we get every season, but maybe that's just me. In any case, as I said before, the sometimes limited animation is a very small thing. In reality, where animation is concerned, I really don't think we have anything to worry about. Seeing how passionate the staff at Doga Kobo working on the project are, it's clear that they are giving it everything they have and deserve all the praise for that. And as the series goes on, I can really feel the dedication woven into the fabric of each episode. Really, one of the biggest things that makes everything pop with the show is definitely the voice acting. In short, they nailed it. Each actor is pretty much exactly how I imagined they'd sound in the source material, and this really helps to immerse you further into the series and make some scenes even more memorable than in the manga, like Melt Nadeshima's really sketchy acting here, or the many ways that Kana expresses herself through each episode. It's so much fun to hear the actors bounce off of one another, and it really gives the show a lot of color in the way that manga isn't able to quite do as a silent medium. Both have their strengths, of course, but in this respect, I am super impressed with the anime. Amazing work all around. And so now let's talk about the music. Now, if you're like me, you probably heard the opening song and just thought, well, I guess I know what I'm listening to next time I take the car on the back roads. And it's true. Idol by Yasobi is an absolute banger. The anime ending is quite good as well, and overall the soundtrack itself really adds to the show. It is an idol anime, so I expected good music, but this really blew my socks off. It's always in the background, actively enhancing the story with rich orchestrals and overall just really well-written songs. I don't think I need to emphasize the massive impact that this anime has had. It's undeniable that people are going to gush about it to the ends of the earth, and for good reason. It's a fantastic story, and the anime has done it justice, making the IP that much more influential and special to so many people. Personally, I loved the anime and I really loved the manga, but I do think that people shouldn't buy into the hype too much before they check the series out for themselves to form their own opinions. I've had some hot takes in the past about certain properties, especially this one, that were kinda ruined for me because of the amount of people saying it was the best thing ever made and tried to unapologetically shove it down my throat for 3 years. I think people like recommendations, but when a bunch of overexcited fans jump on someone to watch something, and then they watch it and they think it's just decent, after which those same fans hate mob them for it, well, that's a very good example of exactly the kind of bad mentality that led to so many of the horrible events in Oshi no Ko's actual narrative. In short, fans should let people breathe and come to their own conclusions on this show. Now, there has been controversy around Oshi no Ko, particularly in episode 6 when Akane tries to take her own life. This holds an undeniable resemblance to the death of wrestler Hana Kimura, who sadly ended her existence after being cyberbullied to excess following her actions on a reality TV show named Terrace House. Since Kimura's own mother has, understandably, criticized the show's inclusion of the events, rabid fans of Oshi no Ko have attacked her online. Now, no matter what your position on Akane's arc may be, Himura's family should be able to move on with their lives and have the right to voice their opinion against something that actively reminds them of the horrible things they've gone through over and over again without crazy fans bullying them online for it. Oshi no Ko was a story created to address the dark side of the media industry and make people aware of it. And it's strange to think that many of the very quote-unquote fans who say they love this show so much would turn around and become the very monsters the narrative works to expose. People who do this really need to reconsider their actions and their devotion to destroying another person's life in the name of a cartoon. But sadly, most of them won't. And if they seriously can't handle the fact that others on the internet disagree with them sometimes, should they really be online at all? When all is said and done, Oshi no Ko is not an easy show to watch, but it is absolutely worthwhile. If you're thinking of watching it, I recommend that you at least check out the pilot episode. It's a pretty definitive start to the story that sets the tone for everything going forward, so it will answer most of your questions on what kind of story Oshi no Ko aims to tell, and if you're going to be into that or not. And if you want to check out the rest of the story and can't wait for the anime, then I'd highly recommend reading ahead in the manga. As good as the animation in the show is, I still think you can't beat Mengo Yokoyari's beautiful illustrations, which have so much care put into them. In addition, you can get a bit more internal dialogue for some characters like Ai and Aqua, among others. And at less than 150 chapters currently, it's a fairly sizable read, but not too much compared to many other IPs. Personally, I'm curious on how much of the source material they'll cover going forward in this adaptation. Chances are the manga might end this year or next, as Akasaka has new projects coming out and the chapters seem to be trending towards an eventual conclusion. And that's personally fine with me. I feel Oshi no Ko isn't the type of story that can be a one piece and go on for 1,000 chapters. Keeping things focused to a neat and proper conclusion would be the cherry on top for this story. Aqua and Ruby need to get some closure, and I'm sure it'll be revealed soon how all this goes in the manga. But until then, what do you think about this anime adaptation? What about the manga and its eventual ending? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. But as always, like, subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video. Thanks for watching.